Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
I never thought I would be the kind of woman who told this kind of story. I used to look at others, on TV, in the neighborhood, even in my own family, and think, how could they do that? How could someone risk everything? And yet, here I am, narrating the events of my life that I still struggle to believe happened the way they did. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the life I had, the one I almost destroyed, and the one I had to rebuild from ashes that I myself scattered. I married Imran when I was 24. He wasn't my first love, but he was the first person who made me feel truly safe. He was responsible, steady, and everyone in my family approved of him. Our wedding was small but joyful. I remember my father crying during the nikah and my mother holding my hand too tight, like she wasn't ready to let go. For the first few years, everything was fine, comfortable even. We settled into a routine. I cooked. He worked. We went on short trips, had dinners with friends, watched movies on weekends. Nothing extravagant, but also nothing extraordinary. I used to believe that this was a good thing. No fights, no scandals, no real pain. But what I didn't realize at the time was that no passion can sometimes be its own kind of emptiness. I began to feel it in small ways. A birthday he forgot, a long silence during dinner, the lack of questions about how my day went. Imran wasn't unkind, he just wasn't present anymore. He would come home tired, fall asleep on the sofa, and wake up to go through the motions again. I tried to talk to him, tried to rekindle things with weekend plans and handwritten notes, but it was like tossing matches into the ocean. And then I met Daniel. It was an ordinary day. I had joined a local community group organizing an art fundraiser. I've always loved art, even studied it for a while before marriage. Daniel was the event photographer. He was younger than me by a few years, with a quiet intensity that reminded me of the boys I used to admire in college. But what truly caught me off guard was how much he listened. Really listened. When I spoke about colors and canvases, he didn't just nod. He asked questions, offered ideas, made jokes that only someone who understood my world could make. At first, I dismissed it. It was harmless. A little attention, some conversations. But slowly, I found myself waiting for those meetings, looking forward to his messages, noticing what I wore on the days we met. I kept telling myself it wasn't serious, that I was just enjoying the feeling of being noticed again. But deep down, I knew I was crossing lines, emotional ones at first. I started deleting texts. I lied to Imran about where I was going, not because I was doing anything physical, but because I didn't want to explain the feelings I couldn't explain to myself. Then one evening, it all spiraled. The fundraiser was over, and the team planned a dinner to celebrate. I told Imran I'd be home late. He barely looked up from his laptop. I arrived at the restaurant, and when Daniel saw me, his face lit up in a way that made something flutter in my chest. We sat next to each other, and even in a room full of people, it felt like we were alone. We didn't do anything wrong that night, not in a physical sense, but in every other way, I knew I had betrayed the man I promised to love and honor. Daniel walked me to my car afterward. The air between us was heavy. I think he wanted to say something more, but I stopped him. I told him I was married, that I couldn't keep going down this road. He nodded, and with that, we both went home. But it didn't end there. I thought cutting him off would be the hard part. It wasn't. The hard part was returning to my life and pretending everything was normal. That night, I lay beside Imran while he snored lightly, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up here, craving the attention of a man I barely knew and feeling more alone than ever with the man I had married. Weeks passed. I tried to focus on my marriage again. I cooked his favorite meals, dressed up for no reason, laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. Imran noticed the change, but I don't think he understood the reason. He thought I was just being sweet again. He started talking more, showing small gestures of appreciation. For a moment, I believed things could go back to how they used to be. But guilt is a strange thing. It doesn't fade when things improve. Sometimes it grows louder because now there's something to lose again. And just when I thought I had buried my mistake, it resurfaced in a way I never saw coming. One day, Imran's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it as usual. But I noticed the name on the screen. Saima, one of the women from his office. I recognized the name only because she once came over with a few colleagues for dinner, and I remembered thinking she was far too friendly with him. It was nothing obvious, just a smile that lingered too long, a laugh that sounded rehearsed. I hadn't thought about it since, but now something felt off. Call it intuition. The next time he left his phone unattended, I hesitated, then opened it. What I found made my stomach churn. There were no explicit messages. Imran wasn't a fool, but the tone of their conversations, the late-night messages, the emojis, it all screamed of something more than professional. There were even inside jokes, mentions of coffee breaks that he never told me about, and a message where she said, "I wish you were here right now." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, my hands trembling, my eyes scanning those words again and again. In that moment, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt exposed, like I had been walking on a tightrope trying to balance my mistake, only to discover he had been walking his own rope all along. And worse, he hid it better than I did. I confronted him that night. I didn't yell. I just showed him the messages and asked, "What is this?" Imran froze. For a second, I saw real panic in his eyes. Then he went into damage control mode. He said it was just harmless flirting, that nothing had ever happened between them, that it was just a joke, a way to pass time at work. He apologized, told me I was the only woman he loved, that he had never meant for it to go too far. I wanted to believe him. But more than that, I wanted to scream that he had no right to act innocent, that I had been drowning in guilt for weeks while he had been playing his own game behind my back. But I didn't tell him about Danielle, not yet. Instead, I nodded. I told him I forgave him. I even held his hand, because in that moment I knew that my revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, strategic, and it had already begun. After that night, something changed inside me. It wasn't just the discovery of Imran's messages. It was the realization that we had both let go of something sacred a long time ago. Maybe not in the same way or at the same time, but equally and completely. I became quiet but not defeated. I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped putting in the effort that once came naturally. I wasn't rude, just distant, polite, measured, present only in body. And he noticed. He began checking in more often, sending me random texts during the day, asking if I wanted to go out. He even brought me flowers once, something he hadn't done since our second anniversary. But I didn't respond with warmth. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I couldn't fake it anymore. The part of me that wanted to fight for this marriage had slowly bled out the day I found his messages. And then, as if fate were nudging me toward the inevitable, Danielle messaged me again. He'd been silent since the fundraiser ended. I assumed we had both moved on, but his message was brief, polite. "Hey, hope you're well. I wanted to return your notebook from the event. Let me know when I can drop it off." I stared at the message for a long time. I knew this wasn't just about a notebook. It was a door, quietly cracked open, waiting to see if I'd push it wider. I replied, "You can drop it at the community center reception. They'll give it to me." His reply came almost instantly. "I'd rather hand it to you personally, if that's okay. I wanted to say goodbye properly." Goodbye. That word caught me off guard. I didn't know why it stung. A few days later, I met him at a small park near the community center. It was mid-afternoon, quiet, almost too quiet. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind people give when they know something won't last. We sat on a bench, barely speaking at first. Then he handed me the notebook. I thanked him. We sat in silence again, watching a group of children play near the swings. Finally, he said, "I know what this was for you, and I never meant to make things complicated. I just enjoyed talking to you, being around you." I nodded. "You didn't make anything complicated." "I did." He turned to me. "You didn't deserve to feel ignored in your own marriage." I looked down, and yet I did. And I let that feeling push me into something that wasn't fair to anyone. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "So this is really goodbye, huh?" "Yes," I whispered. "It has to be." We didn't hug. We didn't touch. We just sat there a little longer, two people who had walked too close to the edge but stopped before falling. After he left, I sat there alone for another hour, processing, letting the goodbye settle in. I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. But when I got home, something unexpected happened. Imran was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. He looked up and smiled. I thought I'd cook dinner tonight. I blinked. "You cooked?" He nodded, trying to make up for being a fool. I watched him move around the kitchen like a man desperately trying to rewrite his mistakes. And for a moment, I saw the Imran I married, not perfect, but trying. Dinner was awkward. He asked about my day, about my volunteer work. I answered, but my replies were short. He was trying. I wasn't. And yet, something about his effort stirred a new question inside me. Could people really change? Could a marriage survive 2 betrayals buried in silence? A week passed, then 2. I stayed quiet about Danielle. Imran stayed quiet about Seima. It was as if we had an unspoken agreement to move forward without dragging each other through the mud. But silence isn't healing. It's hiding. Then, one night, as we were about to sleep, he turned to me and said something I didn't expect. "I think we should go see someone." I frowned. "See someone?" "A counselor, a therapist. I know things haven't been right, and I know some of it is my fault. I don't want to lose you." For a moment, I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because I had too many. I had waited for years for him to acknowledge that something was wrong. And now that he had, I didn't know how to respond. "Okay," I said finally. We began seeing a marriage counselor once a week. At first, it was mostly him talking. He admitted he had grown distant, that he had gotten too comfortable, too lazy in our relationship. He never mentioned Seima, but the guilt was clear in his voice. When it was my turn, I told the truth, just not all of it. I told the counselor that I had felt invisible, that I had started to look for validation outside the marriage, that I had crossed boundaries emotionally, though I didn't say with whom. The counselor listened, took notes, and slowly began to pull the pieces of our wreckage into view. Week by week, the sessions became harder. There were tears. There were fights. And for the first time in years, there were also truths. It was during our 4th session that Imran broke down. He admitted he had been messaging Saima more than he should have, that he knew it was wrong, that he used the attention as an escape from the routine of our life. He apologized again and again. I sat there frozen. The words I'd been waiting to hear felt both satisfying and painful. When we got home that night, I told him I needed a break. Not a separation, not a divorce, just space. A few weeks to think, away from the house, away from the noise. He didn't argue. He just nodded, packed a bag, and left for his brother's place. And for the first time in months, I was alone in my own home. The silence was overwhelming. Every room reminded me of some version of us. The good, the bad, the moments in between. I spent the first few days cleaning obsessively. Then I stopped. I cooked for one. I sat on the sofa and cried without knowing why. I dug through old albums, reread old texts, replayed our wedding video on a whim. I wasn't trying to make a decision. I was trying to feel something real again. One night, I took out my old sketchbook. the one I hadn't touched in years. I started drawing, first random shapes, then faces, then memories. And as I did, I began to see pieces of myself I had lost, long before Danielle, long before Imran's messages. I realized I had let my identity dissolve into the role of wife. I had stopped being a person and become a function, and that, more than anything else, had made me vulnerable to everything that followed. 3 weeks later, Imran came back, not because I asked, but because I told him I was ready to talk. We sat across from each other, no script, no therapist, just us. "I'm not the same person who married you," I said, "and you're not the same either. But maybe that's not a bad thing." He looked at me, eyes tired but open. "So what do we do now?" I took a breath. "We rebuild, but not the old version. That's gone. We start something new. And this time, we're honest about everything." I told him about Danielle, the messages, the meetings, the feelings. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't dramatize it either. He didn't explode. He didn't leave. He just sat there, processing. After a long pause, he said, "I guess we both needed someone else to remind us what we forgot in each other." I nodded. "But I don't want to need anyone else anymore." He reached for my hand. Neither do I. That night, we didn't fix everything. We didn't suddenly become the perfect couple, but we began again, with wounds still healing but eyes finally open, because sometimes it's not about going back. It's about choosing to move forward, together, broken, but willing. 6 months passed, and in those 6 months, I learned more about myself, my marriage, and forgiveness than I had in the entire decade before. Imran and I didn't return to normal, because the truth is, that version of us no longer existed. Instead, we learned how to exist in the aftermath of truth. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. We acknowledged it when necessary. We gave each other space to be human, and we worked, slowly, intentionally, to rebuild something better than before. Therapy became a consistent part of our life, not just because we needed it, but because it helped us communicate without fear. It gave us the vocabulary to express disappointment, hope, and even love again. We started spending time together with no agenda. We took walks after dinner. We played board games. We relearned how to enjoy silence without it feeling empty. But the guilt didn't just vanish. It would visit me on quiet nights, not as a scream, but as a whisper. A reminder of how close I came to throwing everything away. I sometimes wondered what would have happened if I had continued things with Danielle. Would it have ended in regret? Would I have become someone I no longer recognized? And yet, even in those thoughts, I never felt tempted to reach out. That part of my life was closed, not with bitterness, but with understanding. He wasn't the villain. Neither was I. We were just two people who met at the wrong time in our lives. And sometimes, that has to be enough. Imran, too, changed. He became more intentional. He didn't just say, "I love you." He showed it. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency. Listening when I spoke, noticing when I was quiet, apologizing when he slipped back into old habits. He even admitted one night, during a long drive, that he had been tempted to start something with Seema. But something stopped him. "I kept thinking about your face," he said, "how it would look if you found out. And it made me feel sick, but I still let it go too far, and for that, I'll always carry the shame." I didn't say anything. I just reached over and squeezed his hand. Some wounds aren't healed by words, just presence. There were setbacks, of course, days when the past felt louder than the present, times when we misunderstood each other, when old insecurities crept back in. But each time, we chose not to run from the discomfort. We sat with it, faced it. Eventually, we made a new vow, not a formal one, not in front of others, just between us late one night as rain tapped softly on the windows. "No more lies," I said. "No more silence," he replied. "And if we ever feel that distance again, we talk," he finished, "even if it's uncomfortable, even if it hurts." That moment, quiet as it was, meant more to me than our wedding day, because this vow was real, born from mistakes, heartbreak, and the decision to fight for something that almost broke. I don't tell this story to glorify what I did or what he did. I tell it because so many people think affairs are the end of everything. And sometimes they are, but not always. Sometimes, if both people are willing to look at the wreckage honestly, they can build something stronger in its place. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering differently. And love, real love, is not made of perfect choices. It's made of choosing each other, even when it's hard. We're not perfect, but we are present. And that, I've learned, is enough.